Okay, so I'd love to welcome you all to this Lunch and Learn with Symphony 7. As you all know, Symphony 7 is a business community and we're all about using profit as a force for good. And today I'd love to introduce Ronan Leonard from Trnsform. Ronan is going to be sharing with us and he's put together a great presentation, which actually is a presentation with some discussion and an opportunity for everyone to get involved. So please feel free to use the chat function to ask questions, and then we'll have an opportunity to discuss and do some breakout rooms and all sorts of fun things. So Ronan, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself and get us started.
Lovely, thank you, Jenny. So let me just straight away share the slide, and we'll start straight into this. So on behalf of Symphony 7, welcome to this Lunch and Learn on Symbolic Capital. So today, what you'll learn is exactly what is Symbolic Capital, because I know most of you probably have never heard of this before, why it's so important, how to understand and measure yours, and then finally, some actionable steps to increase it. So today's session is for business owners who want to increase their prices. Hands up who wants to do that. Increase their referrals and recommendations to accurately predict your future growth, or to sell your business at a higher price than you would normally get. So this session really came out of one simple question. And it was something that I was asked to somebody in this room, and we'll talk about this later. How do you start a business in the middle of a pandemic with no website and no paid marketing? And on top of that, exceed your expectations and your growth targets. And today you're going to find out how to do that. So we want to make this Lunch and Learn as interactive as possible. So I want you to grab a pen and paper, because a little bit later, we're going to put you into breakthrough rooms, as we like to call them here in Symphony 7, and to help you to understand and measure your symbolic capital. And also then we'll have time for some group shared learning via Q&A at the end of this, so that we can all learn from each other. So for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm one of the co-founders of a US and Australian consulting company called Trnsform. We help leaders who are struggling to realize their full potential for the company and themselves. We identify the root cause, not the symptoms of their lack of success, and you'll learn more about that today. And we challenge organizations and individuals to improve their systems, beliefs, and cultures, which transform them to become more innovative, extraordinary, and enable growth. We're also the sponsor of the C-Suite Hub run by Symphony 7, where each member inside provides services to the C-suite leaders of companies in the mid-cap and market and above. So let's get into this. Did you know that there are two types of capital in the world? There's physical and symbolic capital. So physical capital is the currency you can see, touch, and easily understand. It's things like profit and loss, revenue, financial forecasts, return on investment, money in the bank. These concepts are easy to understand and also, for the most part, very easy to measure, which is why everyone just concentrates on those. But then also there's symbolic capital. Now you can't touch this, but it's just as real. And if you know how to, it's just as measurable. So these are things like your authority, your credibility, your reputation, your experience and expertise, and even your intellectual property. All of these things combine to give you your symbolic capital. So is anyone here in the finance and investment industry? Just put your hands up if you are, or put in the chat that you're in that. Okay, cool. So one of the things that you hear all the time on advertising in the investment space is that you've heard this saying that past performance is no guarantee of future results, right? That's what they tell you all the time. So if profit and revenue and financial results are all about the past and backward looking, how do you accurately predict your future revenue? As I said, most people tend to ignore symbolic capital, and instead they fixate only on what they can see. And as a result, they miss out on a huge value of investing in and improving their symbolic capital, because this symbolic capital is your forward lead indicator, and it's something that eventually converts into physical capital. So we say that measuring physical capital is hindsight, and symbolic capital is your foresight. So if we take a look at the success in our lives, everything leads back to just one thing. It's relationships. And if you look at these bubbles, they're different for everybody else. But it's the bubbles here that you expand that really give you that symbolic capital. So for a lot of people, it's clear your customers, it's your business colleagues, it's your networks, it's community, partners. It can be the profession you're in, the friends that recommend people. If you think about community, so many businesses end up getting business from, they might be at the cricket club with their school, and they find out that somebody there becomes a customer. They might sponsor a footy team, their local footy team, or be known in that community. These all interlink the professional networks. When we go out networking, Symphony 7 is partly a networking relationship within that as well. The people you know in the industry that can refer people to you, give you business, the partnerships you create, all of these things are intangible, but your symbolic capital. And as you work to improve them and grow them and figure out which ones are the most important to you, you can then start to understand what that relationship is, whether it ties back into the profits. So all of these things are something that you either have or should be investing in. And within these relationships and these networks, there are three key components to this. How trusted are you? Because trust and profit are codependent. If people don't trust you, they're not going to refer to you. If clients don't trust you to deliver on what you do, you're not going to get repeat business or referrals. What's the level of confidence that this is something externally that other people have about you and your business? What's the confidence within that? Because we know that if you truly understand somebody else's business, you're able to refer people to them. If you're confident that they're going to do the right thing and they're going to look after that referral, you will then give them access to your network. So it's all about confidence and that external capacity for you to deliver on that. And then the third one is influence. The more influence you exert, the more you're able to charge. So when you look at these three things, what level of trust do you have within each of these networks? How trusted are you with your customers? How trusted are you within your community, your profession, your industry, your other business colleagues? Because relationships, we know, lead to word of mouth, higher price points and referrals because of that reputation, influence, trustworthiness, and this becomes your brand recognition. You just become known. So as a quick example, if you're a professional services firm, the price you charge is heavily influenced by your standing, which is your trust, confidence, and influence, as much as the actual service you provide. Because the more you're trusted and referred and the more you have influence within there, the higher prices you charge. Without those, you can't just put your prices up and expect customers to pay that, because it's not just about the service. So people tend to fixate on having a lot of store and value in how good they are, but without the external influences of the symbolic capital, it doesn't matter. You end up being the world's best kept secret. So you could be amazing at what you do, but if you haven't worked on your symbolic capital, not enough people will know, like, and trust and refer you. So one of the easiest ways to split this up and show you how this all works is to just use a simple diagram we call market position. Everything below the line is really transactional, price-driven markers. So for example, marketing is often interruption marketing. You're marketing people that don't know, like, and trust you. Sales activities are often the same as well. Sales is predominantly about convincing people that they should be buying from you. And then also a lot of companies get stuck on features and benefits. They're trying to convince people that we've got the best feature, we've got the best benefit, this is why you should be buying from us. But all of these are below the line activities, and they're all price driven, and they're all transactional to a lesser or greater degree. It's not the only defining factor, but it's a huge part of it. See, above the line is where we see the real value drivers of a business. So we're talking about referrals, recommendations, as I said earlier, your authority and reputation. There's a stat that B2B companies with referrals experience a 70% higher conversion rate than if it was just through marketing or just through sales or features and benefits. Also from there as well, if you look at a website, websites on average have a 2% conversion rate. It's because there's no relationship there and there's no symbolic capital. You're expecting strangers to come to your website, no matter how good your testimonials are and your features and benefits and all the things that you tell people you're great at, you end up with just a 2% conversion rate on your website. And paid marketing is somewhere between in the teens and the single digits. So again, that's nowhere near as high as your symbolic capital, which, as I said, if you get a conversion from someone that's recommended or a referral, or you're known as authority, it's as high as 70%. So if you look above and below the line, it's obvious which is the most valuable. But then that leads me to a point about what gets measured, gets managed. And I'm guessing that both of you know your sales and marketing conversion rates. Sometimes you obsess over those. If I can just increase my conversion rate on the website from 2 to 3%, I get 50% more leads. Great. If I can convert my Facebook marketing from 4% to 6%, again, I got a 50% increase in leads. But then how many people actually measure their symbolic capital above the line? How many sort of have any kind of program that looks at referrals, recommendations, and how to measure and increase their authority? These value-driven relationships are the core underlying way that you grow a business. And the same thing really is for selling a business or raising capital, because you need a story that's bigger and more important than just the numbers. So if you're looking to sell a business and you want to sell it for 5 times what you think the revenue is, how do you measure and tell a story that tells you something other than just marketing and sales and the features and benefits and those numbers? Because most of us create a business and then we want to exit it. And the only way to really get the value of what we think it's worth is to be able to tell a story beyond just the numbers. Because most people will just look at the hard numbers and go, well, I can't see the value here. I'm not paying 5 times this, not paying 3 times EBIT, because I don't understand the true hidden value you have within this business. All those years of, as I said, the relationships you have within that. So it's also the reason you can't reverse engineer or easily replicate someone else's business model, because you aren't aware of their hidden value and the results of their symbolic capital. And when we start out a business, we're nearly all in the bottom activity here of features, benefits, sales, and marketing. And it's only as the business grows and we start to get that first lot of revenue and the first couple of years in business that we can start to think about referrals, recommendation, and authority. But then what most people don't do is they don't transfer the measurements that they started with, which is marketing, sales, and features and benefits, the below the line. They don't ever make the switch and then start to measure the above the line, which are the true drivers of the value. So when we start getting away from transactional and more into this relationship, we're able to shift our focus above the line. So welcome to the Trnsform Matrix. I'm guessing all of you pretty much know the scene from the Matrix when Neo is offered the red pill or the blue pill. A choice between revealing an unpleasant truth, which is how much symbolic capital do you really have, that's the red pill, or to remain in blissful ignorance and just to measure your dollars and your revenue and your turnover in just that black and white physical capital, which we represent with the blue pill. So in the chat box, I want you to type in red pill if you want to go inside the matrix. Give me a couple of seconds to do that. Excellent, excellent. All right. Okay, let's take the pill and we'll drop into the matrix. So every single business, in my opinion, should be trying to better understand what their prospects and clients really think about them, because this affects your purchasing decisions, which drives your marketing message. This affects how valuable you are. your pricing, your lifetime value, profit margins, a lot of those things that we talked about, which are the physical capital. And this also affects how likely they are to continue to be a customer, because you're paying attention to the trust and the relevancy. Because these are the first signs that your customers' tastes, which is also your beliefs, might have changed. We all know from the pandemic that every single market's been disrupted. People are thinking differently. They want to understand what's more important to them now, what the value is of their business. People have had to move from in dining to offsite dining. People that used to run in-person events to online ones have to figure out what the market has shifted to now and how valuable and how relevant they are. And again, that's not a measurement that you would put on a single dashboard. Sure, the results will end up in your bottom line, but if you're not capturing the value of people and what they're paying for and how that value is shifted, then again, you're moving away from really what's important to your customers. So to do that, we want to look at the effects of how that all pans out. For example, 4 years ago, the polls in the US election were completely wrong, and the Brexit exit 3 years ago was the same. Why is that? It's because polls only measured what people say, not what they did, and seldom what they believe. So to get a true understanding, you need to know what people believe, what people say, and what people do. And this gives you a deeper understanding of the true strength of these relationships that you have. Because without that, again, you're just in the transactional marketing features and benefits, and you don't really get to understand what's important to people. What are they saying? What do they believe? What do they actually do? So to better understand your value, you actually don't need to have a really big marketing research company to create large surveys and focus groups. Instead, all you really need to do is get a small sample of people and actually ask them. You've got to have that conversation with them, which again ties into the red pill, the uncomfortable truth. You really need to know that you're providing the value, that you're meeting and exceeding their expectations, and that they really understand what's important, and you understand what's important about your symbolic capital. Why do they buy from you? Why do they like you? What would it take for them to recommend you? Because if we don't do that, what we end up with is just online surveys. And what they don't do is they don't address all three aspects of this. They don't really get to what people believe, what people say, and what they do. Because we want to measure what they do, not what they say, which goes back to the polling and doing that. Because this is a far more reliable indicator than a computer-driven response where people have no commitment or investment in the answer. And it's why, as I said, polls are often wrong. Because we pesky humans don't always do what we say, right? We've all been there. So how do you calculate this value within your network of relationships? How do you create a three-dimensional view of the trust and the confidence that people have in you and the influence? What's the reach, depth, and length of each of these? So if we're talking about trust, we're talking about everything from customers, prospects, people in the market, your employees are part of that. How trusted are you within that? How trusted are you within your stakeholders? So every company is different, but there's an expanded view of trust. And trust is very simple as that you are meeting or exceeding someone's expectations. And when you're exceeding someone's expectations, you definitely move into the realm of people being somebody that's going to refer you, that's going to recommend you, that's going to endorse you. And you will also increase, what I talked about earlier, when you do all those things, you're increasing your authority. How confident are people that you can actually measure the value you're providing? And again, this is part of the reason of the red pill. It's uncomfortable to ask people, was it value for money? Most people just run a million miles away from asking their customers that. They don't want to know. It's how many restaurants, even when you send a meal back half eaten, how many of those waiters said, what was wrong? What can I do to improve? They don't want to know. It's easier just to take it away and assume that people were full, not to ask that uncomfortable question. But you really want to know how the level of confidence people have in you to deliver and manage their expectations and the promises that you're making. And then finally, influence. What's the benchmark for your influence? What activities will increase this? So things like thought leadership, speaking and writing, they're all ways to improve your influence in the market. But not everyone's comfortable with doing that. Not everybody wants to be the person out there that is writing, that is speaking, that is seen as a thought leader. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially if you're an introvert. But that doesn't stop you from looking at other ways of influence. Influence is something as simple as networking with other people. It's to getting to know people in your industry, it's collaborating with people. It's finding those other parts of that network we talk about, those relationships, and amplifying those to ensure that you're ticking off the strengths and the things that you're really good at, which might not be thought leadership and writing and all those things you just don't want to do. And then when you can start to do this, and we're going to cover off a small aspect of this at the end, which I said, which is the interactive part, you can arrive at an aggregate score that serves as your initial benchmark, something that you can at least know, okay, this is my starting point. Then how do I increase my influence? How do I increase the confidence that people have in me? How do I increase the trust that I know that I'm delivering and I'm exceeding those expectations? So to do that, I just want to give you a very quick highlight into something that most people seem to think is pretty easy to do, which is a Net Promoter Score. I've often had conversations with people say, oh yeah, we use Net Promoter Score. To me, they're also quite frustrated as well. It's a very poor way of measuring what people are doing, because every single business industry is different. So it's almost impossible to provide a dumbed down version of just one magic simple measurement, which is a percentage of your relationships. Net Promoter Scores really just tells you that somebody's clicked a button to say how likely they are to recommend you. But we all know that customer loyalty, satisfaction, and what people believe is not about a simple percentage, but it's more about the causes, the consequences, and the correlation between all of those complex individuals, people, and also the complexity of those relationships that you have. So a Net Promoter Score is really an inaccurate way of measuring customer behavior. You don't need to know if a customer says they're going to recommend you. You need to know that and put a measurement behind something that they actually do that can prove that. A system to allow you to ensure that not only have they said it, but they've done that and measure that. Because reality is, when it comes to producing both current and future valuations for profit forecasts, your most productive and valuable asset are normally your intangible customer-oriented things like your brand preference, your customer trust. And these assets really require monitoring and improving if you want to extract the maximum profit from them. So it's not just necessarily, I said, about the physical assets you have to measure these hidden assets as well. So now it's time to take the red pill even further and to actually begin to look at your networks and relationships and to help you identify, measure, and grow your symbolic capital. So Jenny in the background has been furiously looking at putting you into groups to start to think about how you're going to measure your symbolic capital. We're going to put you into a breakthrough room for around about 10 minutes. And what I'm going to get you to do is to start to look at your key relationships and identify your best assets. So I talked earlier about having a pen and paper ready. So if you can grab that, I'll give you a couple of 30 seconds or so to grab that pen and paper to ensure that you do that. Once you've got that, don't worry, I'll bring up the relationships again just to give you that reminder to write them down. Once you've got that pen and paper, I need you to write down 4 columns. On the left, you can look at relationships or networks. The next box is going to be trust. The one after that is going to be confidence. And then the 4th column is going to be your influence. I'll repeat these again for people who are still getting the pen and paper. And then from there, let's go back to those. You want to start look at which are the important spheres of influence that you have. Which are these trusted relationships and networks? So write these, as many as apply to you, and you can see some benefit in measuring those on the left-hand column. Most people probably start with their customers, but maybe you get as many referrals from partners or business colleagues, or maybe you're your symbolic capital in your industry or profession needs to improve. Maybe you don't network enough, and therefore you don't get enough people that recommend you from within your professional network. So just put those all to the left-hand side. Again, I'll take you back to the piece of paper you're looking. So you're looking for all of those networks and those relationships on the left-hand side. And then the next column is trust, then confidence, and then influence. And you can look to rate those on a scale of 1 to 5. Again, anybody who's missed this, sorry, it's the dog barking. We're looking at, as I said, partners, customers, business colleagues, professional networks. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and just see how everybody's going with, first of all, the piece of paper. Has everybody got their paper ready to go into the breakout room? Okay, so within the breakout room, what you're looking for is first of all, to quickly write down your own scores, and then ask other people, have this conversation. How did you arrive at this score? What are some suggestions you can do to improve it? What would it look like for your finances if you changed at least just one of these metrics and start to get more referrals from people? Or if you got more people to collaborate with you, whatever that looks like. If you can help someone, maybe your lowest score, how can I improve this one? Now, I know that confidence is going to be one of the hardest things to do. Very hard to subjectively put yourself into somebody's mind and think, how confident are they in my abilities? That's an uncomfortable question. But starting to ask these questions will highlight where the gaps are in your symbolic capital and what's most important to pay attention to and focus on. And then from there, you've got about 10 minutes. So you're going to be in groups of roughly 4. Is that right, Jenny? Yeah, groups of 4. So you've got a couple of minutes each just to sit down with that and just to start to talk about, probably at least you probably only got time for one of your lowest scores or highest scores, or something that you've probably identified even previously that you really want to be able to work on to ensure that the symbolic capital turns through into physical capital. So any questions before we go into this? We've got plenty of time. So does anyone want to unmute themselves? They've got some questions prior to going into the breakout room, just so that you're clear, focused, and understand what we're doing. Anthony.
Hi, Ronan. First of all, thanks for everything so far. I just want to double check that the column headings across the top are relationships, trust, confidence, and influence.
Yes.
And then the rows one by one down the left are partners, customers, networks, etc.
Yes, all of those. And then you'll rate each one of those. So for example, relationships with, say, partners, you'll say, how trusted are partners on a scale of 1 to 5? How much confidence do partners have in you that they will, that you can deliver on what you say you will, what your website says, what your area of expertise is? And then what's the influence that those partners feel that on a scale of 1 to 5, that they would rate you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else got some questions?
Yeah, other than making it up, how do you come up with a rating?
Again, this is quite subjective for the first part. This will be based on your experience. You would have had feedback with customers, other people. You would get a bit of a sense for this. What you can do is the point is just to get a bit of a baseline and a benchmark. As I said earlier, then you want to go out and interview people and find out what the true number is. And again, that's the red pill. That's the uncomfortable part. And maybe it's a huge mismatch. You're putting 4 and you interview 3 people and you're at a 2 because they just don't understand exactly what you do, and therefore they can't recommend you. Or they're not confident that if they handed over a client to you, that you would exceed their expectations. So this really is just a very, very simple way at the moment of getting a baseline, and then you can then test that baseline with people that really are able to give you that number.
Thank you.
Ronan, this might be a question for later, but do you have a specific methodology to getting an honest answer from those that you're asking? Often people are quite conflict avoidant. They don't want to upset people. And so when you ask them a genuine question like that, people can be hesitant to be really brutally honest with you.
Yeah, good question. You normally outsource this and get a third party person to do that, because it takes away the fear, it takes away the bias, and also it allows them to truly open up, especially when you tell them that the results won't be shared with people. So if you can create that confidentiality and a framework around that, you can get to the truth. Really what you're looking for is you're looking for the what isness. So I talked earlier about the gap between looking at we call it this idea that you want to look at the root cause of the problems, not the symptoms. So we all have an attachment and a bias towards what we do. It's part of our identity. And then when you can remove that and look at the what isness, are you really a 4 on this? Are you really a 3? And let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's get to the uncomfortable truth, find out your baseline, and then, okay, great, we can improve that now. So that's the reason behind this and the reason that you get someone as a third party, so that you take away that leading question. I was watching a show the other day, and they were doing a turnaround in this hotel, and the owner of the hotel was given this advice that you need to change the name. So she sat down her 6 junior staff and said, "I think this idea is terrible. What do you all think?" And they all agreed with her. Because she's the boss, she framed the question in such a way that they had no choice. So that type of, and she probably didn't even know she was doing that, but she set the whole premise around that one question to set people up to fail or to come up with what she wanted to hear, which is, oh, this is a terrible idea. So that's just one example of how if we're too close to a problem, we can't see it, but also we can't frame it correctly. Who else has got some questions before we go into the room, just so that we can do that? Yeah. I appreciate inquiry. Yes. Yeah. I like that. Now, Dia, I know that this is an area that you are heavily focused on, because I read the book that you gave me several years ago about helping people to really sort of create gifts around referrals and making a whole referral engine. So aspects of this will be very true to your heart. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I love it. Yeah, definitely. 80-20, we like to pay 80 above the line and 20 below the line.
Yeah.
You talk about the marketing.
Yes. Yeah. So did aspects of that ring true to you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So again, before we go into the breakout room, any more questions just around?
Can you, and this is maybe a stupid question, I'm just struggling to sort of draw a line between the difference between the writing around trust and confidence, because to me, trust is they trust that what I say I'm going to do. And the confidence is that I'm actually going to do it. So they're very similar, or am I missing something there?
Confidence really is in your ability. So there is a subtle difference between the two. How confident am I this person will actually do the work? Do I trust someone? It is a little bit different. I might trust them explicitly. I might, give them the keys to my house, but I'm not confident that they actually do an amazing job. So they are two different things when you look at them that way. So they sound similar on paper, but you start to think of it that way. Do I trust this person? Yeah, great person, love them. Do I know enough about their service to be confident that they can exceed someone I recommend's expectations? I don't know. I don't know enough about them, maybe. So that's how the two things are subtle but different.
So trust is really more about the personality, whereas the confidence comes down to their ability or skill, the technical deliverables, being able to do it. Awesome. That makes sense. Thank you.
Ronan, I've just got one question. You talked about getting a third party to do this with your customers, your business partners, etc. Would you do that? Because we use a mix, and I've always wondered, would you do that face to face, or would you do something like on SurveyMonkey, or utilize the tool to do that?
Again, SurveyMonkey is a click and everything. You're looking for something deeper than that. You're looking for what they believe.
Yeah.
And often you don't get that without a face-to-face or a Zoom face-to-face conversation with people. You're looking for tone, you're looking for body language, you're looking for potentially follow-up clarification of that, whereas a survey is very black and white. Sure, every single survey is the answers are really dictate what the results are, because you come in with a certain bias, just even how you language a question, which doesn't give you the subtle nuances from that. So you really are looking for beliefs, underlying beliefs around that. And so a survey on its own is only that indicator. As an example, I said the Net Promoter Score, you could have a 95% NPS. And then if you actually ask all those people, say 100 people clicked on that, how many of them did actually recommend you? Oh, 5. So they've clicked that they're likely to recommend you, but they haven't actually followed through with that intention and done it, which makes the score useless. It's a vanity metric that you put up and go, yeah, we got a Net Promoter Score of 95%. But how many people actually then followed through and delivered on that? Probably nowhere near that number. So it's great. It's great to put on that on the website, and it builds a little bit of influence and trust, but it doesn't drive your business forward if people aren't actually doing that. So if referrals are a huge part of your business, you would actively create something that measures it right the way through. How many people then actually referred it? What does that look like? Dear probably has programs that then includes a present to give someone a recognition, a thank you, that ties it back and closes the loop. So that's just one idea of if you're really looking at referrals, you want a whole program that measures it from end to end so that you know that it's working.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions before?
Yeah, Ronan, sorry, I've got a question. Have you got any tips on how you would distinguish between a customer rating you, if you like, as a business versus the experience they might have or the relationship they might have with, say, the sales rep that calls on them? So particularly in larger organizations where you might have sales or account people managing a major account. So the person that they see and they interact with mostly is that individual. So sometimes what can happen is the perception of good, bad, or otherwise will be with the person rather than the organization. Whereas in those larger organizations, I expect what we're trying to see is, do the alignment or the favoritism, the strengths and the weaknesses, as you've put it, between the two organisations. Certainly, you'd need to rate both, but I'm just asking, are there any tips that you've got on how you might be able to separate the two?
It's a good question. Clearly, every organisation is made up of individuals, right? We're the sum of all those parts. So it's very hard to separate the two. If you had a bad experience with a customer service rep or a salesperson, then that reflects on the whole company. It's almost impossible to separate the two. What you can do is, if I'm hearing it right, are you saying that if someone has a bad experience, how does then the company, if they have a bad experience with a person, how does the company build that trust back up? Is that what you're asking?
Or how, the company itself, it's a bad experience with that individual person, which is clearly an issue, but the company overall might be fine. If you take that individual out. So how do you get the picture between the organisation, or the distinction between the organisation's performance versus the individual?
It would depend on the relationship between that. Is every time you don't either meet or exceed your expectations of your customers, you lose a small amount of trust. Whether that trust is implicitly tied to that one individual or the organization, it's almost impossible to differentiate between the two. But without a specific example, I'm struggling to figure out exactly how to answer this question.
I think probably what you're saying is the more information you collate, that'll paint the picture for the organization up or down or average, and then the individual is the individual score, and that needs to be addressed as it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, a Symbolic Capital dashboard is probably 6 or 7 different key indicators, and what we'll do after this, we'll look at probably just one for you. So don't want to overwhelm it, but we'll just look at just one. What's your magic number? One thing that'll drive it forward. But it's a composite picture really of multiple things. You're talking about probably one instance where you can still repair trust from an individual, or if that individual leaves and they're a key important person, you want to make sure that the organization doesn't suffer because your gun salesman leaves. So there would be ways around that to address that in a framework that you're creating.
Yeah, okay.
All right, guys, so let's get into the breakout room and you can start to sort of measure yours. What you're really looking for is probably just one number. What's the one specific relationship that you have that you'd like to work on, because you know that that will turn into your symbolic capital. So have fun in the breakout rooms, and we'll come back and we'll start to unpack some of these things and what you found out.